Welcome to the La Jolla Conference, our 30th anniversary. This is a big milestone for us here at the Institute of the Americas. And we decided it's such an important milestone, we're going to celebrate the entire month of May. We're doing all kinds of different things this month, and obviously through the virtual platform, through the online setting. And one of the things we're doing are what we're calling deep dives. We're doing a series of interviews and discussions that extend a little bit beyond the typical panel and allow us to get into some unique topics. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking with some folks today about. And this is our Young Energy Professionals View from the Next Generation. My name is Jeremy Martin. I'm Vice President for Energy and Sustainability at the Institute of the Americas. And welcome, like I said, to this installment of the La Jolla Conference, our 30th anniversary. This is a great panel. Let me just read to you who we have here with us, and then I'll give a little bit more of an introduction, and then we'll get into some of this interesting material, because I do want to hear what the views from the next generation. I'm sure you all do as well. Andres Prieto, a climate and energy economist at Third Way, a think tank in Washington, D.C. Mark Burgunder, a power origination senior specialist at Southern California Edison, just a ways up the road here in Southern California. We'll get Mark to explain what a power origination senior specialist does. Catherine Hillis, an EO100 program intern at Equitable Origin, and on a glide path, I hope, in her final weeks of graduate school. As a matter of fact, I should say everyone on this panel today is a graduate of the UCSD GPS program, so that's important. And Catherine will be very soon adding to that graduate roster her name. So, and also we have Taylor Grunwald, who's an associate at RMI, which is a think tank in Colorado that some of you may know better as the Rocky Mountain Institute, but is officially now known as RMI. So I also, in full disclosure, want to recognize that everyone on this panel has at some point been an intern at the Institute of the Americas. So we are familiar with one another. I hope that helps our conversation. But the usual disclaimer goes with that. Any errors or mistakes are my own. So their comments, they're all my fault, my own fault. Those. No, joking aside, we have an amazing group here. The brain power assembled on this panel makes me glad I'm not entering the workforce today. Makes me glad I'm actually on a different glide path. Instead of finishing grad school, I'm wondering how well my portfolio will enable me to retire. So the brain power is amazing. So let's jump right in, and what is the view? And so what I want to do is ask each one of our panelists today to share how they got into or how they pursued a career in energy, why they pursued a career in energy, and why they're passionate. Because believe me, these guys, they're passionate about energy and climate issues. So Andres, let's start with you. Why a career in energy? And why? What's the passion? What's the origin? And talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I guess there is a little bit of a story of why I first got into energy, but broadly, I'm just a really good millennial in that sense that I need my job to be something good for the world, right? I care a lot about climate change, and I wanted to work in something that I think has social value. But I think the story kind of is that I was working in consulting way back in the day, and there was this book on biohistory in the consulting library. I guess we had a bit of a library, and I remember reading a lot about the Earth, and then I had to go back to doing this presentation for, I think, some sort of bread company, multinational, and I was like, I care about this way more than what I'm doing for work, and I think that's where I started to shift. I got a job at the Mexican Stock Exchange. I started to work in carbon pricing. I did my graduate program, and now I work in DC on climate and energy policy. So I think it's just me being a good millennial.
Being a good millennial. Okay. Maybe that'll be one of my follow-up questions. What's being a bad millennial? But anyway, Mark Burgunder. Thanks, Andres. Mark, so you're passionate about power origination. What's your day job? What got you there?
Yeah, it's a good question. So my day job is running competitive solicitations for new energy resources. So we send out a request for offers to the market. We receive offers, we evaluate them, and then we execute and award and execute contracts with independent power producers. So that's for solar predominantly, and most recently, lots of energy storage. So the genesis of why I'm there, much like Andreas, probably like everybody on the call, wanting the career that I pursued to have intrinsic and external value, which is why I decided to work to minimize carbon emissions and promote sustainability. And the genesis of that was probably being a Peace Corps volunteer in Namibia and just seeing how the people are so impacted by minute changes in climate, because it is such an arid and dry place. And so I wanted to pursue a career in climate mitigation and adaptation, and that led me to UCSD, to Institute of the Americas, where my focus shifted into energy a little bit, and that's how I ended up at Southern California Edison.
That sounds like a great career track. So Catherine, you're not quite there, but you are, because you're working in an internship that's effectively a day job. Tell us a little bit about your story and passion.
Yeah, so I'm not quite as great-hearted as everyone on here. I grew up in Oklahoma, so I didn't have really any other options to think about than energy. It's kind of the whole story there. So
You're a bad millennial? Is that what
I'm a bad millennial. Yeah, definitely. This is what a bad millennial is. And so I went to work at an oil and gas company after I graduated college, which is something I don't tell people in California, but it's true. And then through that experience, I was supporting the renewables trading team and got to see how basically government regulation is what's forcing innovation in this really, really old industry. And from there, I thought, this is what I want to do. I'm interested in policy. I want to go back to school and focus on this, not work directly for a producer or downstream company, but have this wider view and really think about how we make the energy transition, but how the energy transition doesn't bankrupt parts of the country, basically. So kind of trying to form that bridge between how do we bring all these skilled workers from the oil and gas into new fields is what I think about a lot, and how we hold the oil and gas industry more accountable as we make this transition.
Fantastic. We'll come back. I'm going to ask about energy transition, but let's Taylor, you're probably a year after graduating. So talk to us about RMI and your day job and your passion.
Sure. Yeah, I work on the carbon-free buildings team. So we're essentially trying to electrify different end uses in buildings as part of solving the climate change issue. I guess sort of what brought me here, I echo my colleagues' millennial comments. I do see the threat of climate change is sort of existential for me and potentially my children. So I knew I wanted to sort of devote my intellectual energy towards trying to solve the problem. I also think maybe on another personal note, I'm sort of fascinated by the complexity of this energy system, which is just so intimately enmeshed in our lives. And it presents so many opportunities for really cutting edge research and analysis and thinking through really thorny policy issues. So it's attractive in that sense as well.
Absolutely. The complexity, I think, and whenever people want to distill energy into a bumper sticker or a slogan, it makes us all hackles are raised. And so I think that's a perfect segue to, you guys have nicely laid out what brought you into your current, your current jobs and why, and the passion. And I hear the word climate, I hear the word climate action, existential threat, those kinds of things. So let me ask you, I think it'd be fascinating to hear from this group how you define energy transition, because that is, when we start talking about, that means a lot of things to a lot of people, or it can mean different things to different people. So Taylor, let's go in reverse order here. How do you define energy transition?
I guess to put it simply, it's moving from a carbon intensive energy system and economy to a zero carbon energy system and economy. Okay.
All right. So Catherine, the oil and the bad millennial, what do you?
Oh no. Yeah, so I agree. I think it's where we find a way to power our world and our lives that's not aggressively warming our climate in an unsustainable way. I think what that looks like is kind of the $1 million question we're all trying to figure out. There's a lot of different options right now. I think something that's getting more popular, but that sometimes get lost in the energy transition talk is about an equitable transition, how we make sure that the future we create is best for everyone, not just that we're lowering carbon emissions, but that we're also bringing up other people around us and thinking about the consequences of what we do. So that's what I would hope to see from an energy transition.
No, it's a great point and a nice segue to Mark, who referenced his time as a Peace Corps volunteer. So Mark,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts? And I mean, as you're originating power, I mean, maybe it doesn't translate, but how do you transition?
Yeah, so it's nice that I get to be part of an organization that is implementing state goals that are expressly designed to facilitate that transition. And so I think how I would define it is much like my colleagues. It is a transitioning away from carbon emitting resources, specifically with regards to how we electrify our homes and businesses. But I also think that something that kind of gets lost in the discussion is reliability. So how do we reliably transition away from that? I know we've talked about intermittency in the past, and 1 megawatt of solar is not the same as 1 megawatt of coal, unfortunately. And so how do you effectively, efficiently, and reliably make that transition, much to Catherine's point, in a way that is cost effective for the customers who are paying for that electricity. I think this is also, the transition is maybe a misnomer. I feel like we'll never stop transitioning. I think that we will always be in a process of changing the resource mix to things that are cheaper, more efficient, more cost effective, et cetera. And there's so much money now, it seems, in this space of new technology development and deployment that I think that we're going to see changes decade on decade for a long time to come.
That's a great point. I mean, there are those who argue that this is the latest transition, and we've been going through transitions, wood to coal to fossil fuels, oil and gas, et cetera, et cetera. Andres, I know you have an interest in nuclear, so but I won't preclude your response. Energy transition from your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to everyone's definition here, I kind of think of it as a technologist, I guess. It's a wave, like Mark says, we're never going to stop transitioning. It's a series of waves of development and deployment of new low carbon technology. It'll come like in different, like first we're seeing a lot of decarbonization in the power sector. Then we're going to see more in transportation and buildings, and hopefully we'll see industry and agriculture towards the end. And yeah, we're going to keep improving on the system. I think it'll look very different in different countries. For example, gas will be around in the US and Canada because it's so cheap, but will that be the same in other parts of the world? What is the transition going to look like? And will nuclear play a role? For example, in Asia, they're building a bunch of nuclear plants, right? And is that going to be the same in Europe and the United States? But yeah, broadly, I think it's a series of waves, and it'll look different, but we'll get there. I hope. I really hope for our sake that we'll get there.
But with I think what you all have emphasized, and sort of the implicit here is it's all driven by climate action. As to your answers to the sort of opening background question, let me jump right to a very specific question that I think I'll throw back to you, Andres, and then see if anyone else wants to jump in. For a long time we talked about the importance of pricing carbon, and you can't really do energy transition, and you can't do the kinds of development efforts we want if you don't have a price on carbon. Does pricing carbon still matter?
Yeah, I mean, I have worked a lot on carbon pricing, both from my time at the stock exchange and right now at the think tank. Yeah, I think pricing carbon is still really important. It's a very important policy. I think what's changed really is that we used to think, or at least carbon pricing advocates used to think, that it would be the leading climate policy, right?
Yeah.
But then carbon prices didn't really rise up to the levels that we need them. And when they do, there's a bunch of exceptions for specific sectors. They've never really been as economy-wide as proponents wanted them to be. So I just don't think that we can rely on it solely. But carbon pricing is still very important, I think. And one of the reasons I say that is because we need a lot of enabling infrastructure for decarbonization. We're going to need to expand our grids. We need to modernize our grids. We need charging stations. We will probably need more pipelines for hydrogen and whatnot. All that is going to cost a lot of money, and we need new sources of revenue. And carbon pricing is a really good tool, and it's not so easy to earmark the revenue in all countries, but I do think it's an important tool for a lot of countries. And I think we will hear a lot of discussion about carbon pricing in the next couple of decades. That said, I focus a lot on the United States because of my job. I currently work only American policy, and if there's one major economy where we might not see carbon pricing, it might be the United States. And we can get into that at some point, but I think broadly, to answer your question, it still matters. It just doesn't, it's different than what we thought it would be, right?
So why don't we do this, and we'll do like a rapid fire, and then we'll go to a different question, but quickly, yes or no. Catherine, does carbon pricing still matter, or putting a price on carbon matter?
Yes, definitely. I think so.
Mark?
Yeah, I think it does. I think it also matters what the price is. We have cap and trade system in California, but I think consensus is that it's underpriced. So
Not quite the leverage that, like Andres noted, yeah. All right, Taylor, yes or no?
I'll say yes, maybe with a caveat that I think that a lot of the solutions are going to have to be more technological rather than policy oriented. And when you think about carbon pricing and the high visibility of some of the costs to consumers, they're politically sort of untenable in many cases. So I don't really count on them, I guess. But yes, I think in long term we will need them.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think if we'd had this question and discussion 5 years ago, it would have been, a much more affirmative. That's absolutely the starting point to have a real climate action campaign or action policies construct. So, I want to now pivot. I'm going to go to Catherine here because we've hinted a little bit at this, but let's take it on and talk about natural gas because, and I think, judging by your previous answers, viewers and listeners won't have any doubt why I'm going to Catherine first on this question. But where does natural gas fit into the transition? And I think this is, a question that is really up for a lot of debate, especially with the new administration in DC. Catherine, what are your thoughts?
Gosh, I'm getting a bad reputation through this.
No. You're my oil and gas wing person.
No.
On this.
Yeah, I definitely think that natural gas will be around probably for longer than a lot of people want it to. I do think it will be a bridge fuel and something that stays around for intermittency for wind and solar. But I think a lot of what needs to happen is more accountability from the natural gas industry, higher reporting standards, more controls of emissions, and we just need a way that we can all agree on to do carbon accounting and emissions monitoring. There are tons of companies cropping up that monitor natural gas and oil and gas in general emissions in a lot of different ways. And there really is a strong need for centralization and a way to do it that's effective and that is very transparent. And that's a huge endeavor. It certainly gets very technical beyond what I can understand very quickly, but I think that's hugely important for the industry if it wants to stay around.
Being very honest about the methane question, the flaring question. I mean, just taking
Absolutely.
that on. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Excellent. Yeah, no, and let me take this moment to commend everyone the great paper that Catherine worked on as an intern at the Institute of the Americas on gas to power in Guyana and sort of the debate in Guyana right now over indeed some of the excessive flaring and some of the issues around offshore oil discoveries that have gas. And so and one idea is to bring the gas onshore for baseload power, which by the way would displace terrible fuel oil that's currently expensive and dirty and something that the Guyanese should move on from. But in writing that paper, we set off a little bit of a debate on social media about, well, can they just leapfrog straight to renewable sources? So that brings me to Mark. Thinking about that Guyana question, let's turn to California. The idea of leapfrogging and gas has a role. I think you started to allude to this earlier about the baseload and reliability question. How has California managed this enormous uptick in our renewable deployment and the intermittency question?
Yeah, it's with a substantial fleet of natural gas resources to fill in intermittency. I agree with Catherine that we'd like to see gas as a bridge fuel, but that bridge seems to get extended every year. That we're going to be seeing natural gas in the resource mix in California for, I think, decades to come, probably past 2050.
Wow, that's a pretty important. The average person probably wouldn't think that from what they read about California.
Yeah, I think it's an important source of fuel for reliability, and it will be used more in some months than in other months. In the summertime, obviously, you would see more usage, but it is an important source of power for flexibility and reliability and filling in where renewable energy and energy storage resources, at least right now, can't fill in. So I think it'll be around for a while. In terms of California addressing the intermittent renewable energy dilemma, yeah, historically it's been natural gas. There have been lots of emergency procurement efforts that have been sent down by the state to utilities and load serving entities throughout California that have required the procurement of thousands of megawatts of new capacity, and most of that has been energy storage. So there's now two kind of flavors of energy storage that are going to be developed and are going to be coming online pretty quickly here at the end of the summer. One is like standalone energy storage, so that is storage that can fill in when there are unexpected dips in wind and solar throughout the day, so through the ancillary services markets. And the other type is like a hybrid type of storage asset, which is paired with a solar field. So the goal there would be to charge in the middle of the day and discharge in the evening peak. So you it's just shifting energy from the middle of the day to the evening time. And I think there's going to be several thousand megawatts of energy storage coming online this year and next year and continuing into the future. And I think that's going to really change how we think about the intermittency issue regarding variable energy.
Which you started to bring on a question I wanted to put on the table, but if anyone else wants to jump in, anyone want to jump in? I mean, you guys all have at least some experience in around that question and the intermittency. It doesn't necessarily have to be responding to California. Anyone else want to jump in, Taylor or Andres, or any thoughts on?
Can we still jump in on the natural gas question?
Okay, yeah, please.
I just want to flag that a large percentage of natural gas consumption is in the residential and commercial sectors. A lot of people think about it traditionally in the power sector, but
right.
There's a lot of consumption in other sectors. And among the people that I work with, they don't really see a role for natural gas going forward, especially because we have such good viable alternatives in terms of electric appliances for different end uses in those sectors. So.
Good point, Andres. Any thoughts on before we sort of think about the different question?
Yeah, I think I had something, but then I started thinking about natural gas and buildings and lost my train of thought. But
sorry.
I know this is like a lot of material, but look, you can always come back. I mean, the other thing I wanted to put on the table that we've talked a little bit about here or talked around about is this, with the broader decarbonization. And then again, we're all sitting, or not all, but some of us are sitting here in California. Electrification of transport, right? I mean, and then so this starts to get a lot of attention. I mean, there's a variety of reasons why, but so I want to get your thoughts. Maybe we'll start with you, Andres, on the whole question of how important in this broader decarbonization, getting to low carbon and net zero ultimately, does electrification of transport mean?
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious to hear what the other panelists think, because obviously, from my perspective, transportation, electrifying transportation is a must, right? It's the number one sector in the United States in greenhouse gas emissions. It hasn't been decarbonizing in past years like the power sector. it's absolutely essential. And Americans don't really use public transit that much. We should build more, but it's not an if, it's a when. But my question is, I mean, how is this going to play out in the developing world? Because electrifying transport will increase electric demand a lot, and it requires all this infrastructure, all these charging stations. Today, I think, or yesterday, Honda announced that it'll stop producing ICEs, internal combustion engines, by 2040, I think. And but how is the rest of the world? Is everyone going to be ready for only EVs by 2040? That's the main question I have, and I don't really have a good answer for it because I'm looking at it from the American perspective, and I think you can get only EVs in the United States by then. But how will it work in other places? I don't know if anyone has any thoughts about that.
Well, Mark did a paper at the Institute about Peru. I don't know how much he remembers of his great research on that. Maybe we'll start with him and let Catherine and Taylor think. Well, I don't know. No spoiler alert. Just over to Mark.
No, I think Andres is bringing up a great question, and I think he might know the answer to it. It's going to be really difficult. I think referencing the paper that we did in Peru, we interviewed a lot of people for that paper who were transportation and energy professionals based in mostly Lima, and there was a lot of mixed responses to the question of the timeline and the feasibility of mass electrification. So yeah, lots of infrastructure development, lots of reliable new capacity, which is expensive. Building the facilities themselves, the transmission and distribution systems that go along with those to get that to the most amount of people is very challenging. So yeah, I think it's a great point Andres brings up, and I think if you can't buy internal combustion vehicles past 2040, it's going to be a massive issue for people in parts of the world that they don't have access to that type of infrastructure.
Yeah, the one upside in the Peruvian market in terms of availability, so it's sort of a 50-50 more or less. I mean, there's a little bit of wind and solar, but it's primarily a hydro and natural gas system. So at least a little bit on the cleaner side. So, not starting with the fuel oil or diesel. But yeah, Taylor, jump in on that. I mean, what's your thought on that? Where do you see parts of the world? I know RMI is an international organization. So what sort of are you and your colleagues looking at?
Not super well versed on the transportation subject. I know for the broader developing world, it is going to be an issue. But in some areas where we do work, India and China, I think in China they're outpacing us in electric vehicle adoption. So I guess that's encouraging.
Yeah, and bringing that back to our Latin America focus, and indeed, particularly the BYD, the Chinese bus maker, the electric bus maker, is just pretty much the only vendor in Latin America for electric buses right now. So for sure on that regard, but yeah, I mean, still the numbers are minimal. But all right, Catherine, I mean, you're working more on but yeah, your thoughts, please.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely defer to everyone else who knows a lot more, but certainly agreed that it's absolutely essential and will be very difficult to do in certain parts of the world. But still, there are a lot of barriers, even in the US. There's equity issues around where charging stations are, and then just the affordability of EVs right now. So there's still a lot of challenges to face right here also.
Yeah, I mean, the scalability and like you say, I mean, the pure numbers, I mean, it's hard to fathom in some ways. I mean, we here in California driving around, you sometimes get perhaps you don't realize the challenges in other places, because we are pretty fortunate here. I feel like there's nowhere I go, whether it's a shopping center or a car wash, there's already infrastructure there for electric vehicles. Now there's price points. It's certainly not free, and like everything else. And by the way, meanwhile, the gasoline at the pump is costly too. So there's, in effect, a carbon price right there that you sort of start to look at. Hopefully one day I'll have an integrated electric vehicle, rooftop solar, and I will have exactly what Mark was talking about, which is my own little mini grid, my own little island where I'm dispatching myself off of my electric vehicle that's pulled off by rooftop solar in the day, and yada, 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 right? All right, well, we're wrapping up here. So let me do this. I got a couple questions to end, and then I'll ask you for any final thoughts. anything that you've been wanting to share that were part of my my list of topics. So let's do this. Let's do like when I say, you say. When I say batteries, Andres, what do you say?
Important. Batteries are important. That's
Okay.
yeah.
Mark?
mean,
Oh,
yeah.
sorry. Go ahead. No,
go-
finish.
go.
No.
I want to hear everyone else first. So
You're going to have to respond. You keep wanting to hear everyone else. So I'm going to come back to you at the end. I'm going to make it. Mark?
Yeah, for batteries, I think long duration, so 8 hours or more. The California State Legislature just sent a letter to the CPUC, Public Utilities Commission, California here, requesting that they seriously look at long duration energy storage. So I think that's going to be coming next.
Taylor?
I say resilience. When you think about recent events in Texas, it's possible that batteries in the home, sort of those large battery packs, might have been able to ameliorate some of those challenges.
Catherine?
Yeah, couldn't agree more with Taylor. As someone who experienced the Texas power outages, batteries are definitely necessary. So I think of light and running water.
Did you go without water for a few days, or?
Yeah, for 3 days, no water or power. So a lot to be examined there.
Yeah, the Texas lessons learned to be continued for sure. When I say hydrocarbons in 10 years, Catherine, what do you say?
I'm very biased, clearly, but still around.
20 years.
Probably still around.
Taylor?
I'll say optimistically steep decline.
In 10 years. Steep decline. 20 years, very steep decline?
Yeah, or just sort of essentially zero.
Okay. Mark?
I agree with Catherine. I think we'll see similar emissions levels in 10 years. Yeah.
And then 20, you're more optimistic or not?
I'm more optimistic in 20 years. I think particularly in California, we're in the middle of a transition moment now. We're about to shut down the last nuclear plant in California, Diablo Canyon. And I think as a result of that, we might see stable emissions through at least the next 10 years.
Andres, so 10 years, 20 years, and then any other thoughts that you've been assembling as we've talked about other topics?
yeah, I mean, I was gonna say volatile is the word, because there's a lot of moving parts that I'm seeing, both on the demand and the supply side. But as to where demand's gonna be in 10 years, I think I'm a little bit closer to Mark. I don't think oil demand will be that much lower in 10 years, but I do think it'll be much lower in 20 years. I hope. But yeah, there's a lot of moving parts. I mean, on one side, you've got how effective and fast is climate policy gonna make a dent on oil demand. But on the other side, you also have, oil companies are struggling a lot even to get capital these days, right? Because they are so volatile. The prices went negative and whatnot. But on the other side, you have developing world countries, which are growing really quickly in some cases, especially Asian countries. And you have new suppliers. You have, Canada, Norway, Brazil, Guyana. They're all going to ramp up their, at least before the pandemic, it seemed like they were all going to ramp up their production. So the forces of supply and demand are all over the place. So it's going to be just as volatile as it's ever been. I mean, I think it's and I will say this because I'm Mexican, I'm the token Latin American in this, I do think that oil countries should divest. I do think they need to include a lot of countries. It's just a bad idea for the public finance of those countries to rely so much.
Well, there is a de facto divestiture underway in Mexico. I don't think they would describe it that way, but that's in effect what's occurring over the last several years. It only seems to be continuing. You can see the trend that they will certainly cease to be major producers for a variety of reasons that we don't want to talk about. But at least it achieves your goal. Maybe not the policy construct you would argue for, but same result. All right, guys, final thoughts, final questions. Here's a question. Do you think, I mean, we've had this Leaders Climate Summit the last couple of days. We've had the arrival of the Biden administration. There's been so much, news and the appointments of John Kerry and Gina McCarthy and all. So let me ask you this question and we'll wrap up here. Does the arrival of the Biden administration, does a new and aggressive posture from Washington, from the White House, from US government change, does it resuscitate Paris Agreement and the NDCs, and does it resuscitate and really push us forward on climate action? Catherine, you're shaking your head. I think that is a yes.
Yes, I certainly hope so.
Okay.
Definitely.
Taylor?
I'll say it's definitely yes. Just having a more receptive EPA, I think, is really important for the work that we're doing at RMI when it comes to regulating fossil fuel powered appliances. So yeah, definitely.
Thanks. Mark?
Yeah, climate change has been the #1 ticket item when voting since I started voting. And so it's nice to see, and it renews my belief that we will make substantive changes, especially when it's become the primary focal point of our trade. At least that was the, I think, statement recently, and of our international presence. So yeah, I'm hopeful.
Andres, you're in DC.
Yeah, no, obviously I'm very excited about the Biden administration, and I think it's going to be really good for climate policy. I am a little bit skeptical of whether countries will regain trust in the United States just because Biden's been elected, because there's going to be another election in 4 years, right? And will these climate policies persist? And we took all the money from the Green Climate Fund, and we've done all these actions that kind of betray the trust of the developing world or Europe and China or whatever. I mean, I think it's going to be good, and I think I just really hope that countries can trust the United States. I'm not sure that they can just yet.
I hope so too. Yeah, no, I hope I can trust the United States for sure. No, it's a fair point. It's a fair point. And as all of us here have talked about a lot, the intersection of elections and politics and energy, and it is consequential. Andres Prieto, Catherine Hillis, Mark Bergender, Taylor Grunwald, thank you all so much. This is the views from the future, but not really views from today. You got the passion. You understand just exactly how important climate is. I mean, we just heard from Mark specifically his #1 issue when he goes into the vote. So. Good, bad millennials, we'll take them all. I really appreciate your time today. This has been great. We'll look forward to continuing on, and best wishes as you continue to make the world a better place, and have a great weekend.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Jeremy.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.